Hi, it's Lerald, and the PoE Early Access launch is here, and it is spectacular. In this video, I'm going to talk about, I guess, really 5 things: the PoE 2 release, the difficulty, the bosses, the axe, and then my character and acolyte of Chayula Monk, aka the Chonk. Alright, let's get into it, but first, YouTube law dictates that I have to say like and subscribe. There we go. Editor's note, I'm the editor. There are no Act 1 or Act 2 final boss spoilers in this video. I just wanted to go ahead and add that in there because I don't care about spoilers, but I know a lot of people do, and I want to be sensitive to people who care. So, we have really been having a lot of fun with the early access release. Starting with the release, the day before the PoE release, PoE 2 release was scheduled to happen, Jonathan put out a video saying that it had over 1 million redemptions of early access keys, and that players should be expecting queues, downtime, that sort of thing over the release weekend. And for what it's worth, there was about a 2-hour and 45-minute delay on the game release. I think it was scheduled for 2 p.m. Eastern time, and it came out was actually playable and stuff. They had some kind of false starts. I think it wound up being playable at 4:45, little between 4:30 and 5. All right, so since that point, I think the game has been pretty smooth. I had a little bit of rubber banding in like kind of mid-morning on Saturday, but that was pretty much it. Just some like occasional rubber banding in Act 2, some of the more cramped areas. Around 9 a.m. on Saturday, there were 2 disconnects. Unfortunately, those kind of lined up with when I was doing the Act 2 boss. I started rubber banding on the Act 2 boss and then died, and that was unfortunate. The pull was going really well. And so I hit release, and then the servers went down. So I guess I wouldn't have killed it anyway. Logged in after a minute or so in the queue, no big deal. And I actually respawned back at the boss. The checkpoint right in front of the boss worked, and that was great. But I felt like, part of why I died was I had very low lightning res and wanted to fix that. So I went to town, fixed my resistances, and then the servers went down again. And when I tried to log back in and take the portal back, it existed, but it was trying to go back to an instance that no longer existed. So I did have to re-clear the entire final area of Act 2. Basically the only annoying server issue. And, there are a ton of comparisons to Dark Souls and Elden Ring. I think those are mostly fair, maybe a little inadequate, but I would not compare that to either of those. I would compare that particular boss run back to Dark Souls 2 in that it was made by Satan. Other than that, I think the server stuff has been great. I didn't have any queue logging in this evening, so really feeling very positive about the state of this release. Despite some apprehension, I think it has been pretty close to flawless other than that opening 2.5-hour delay. Now I want to talk about difficulty, and I think there are kind of 2 schools of thought on the state of difficulty, and those basically boil down to the PoE Reddit and the PoE 2 Reddit. I think the PoE Reddit's response has been like, the game is too hard, it's too slow, it's ruthless. They just want to like right mouse button everything to death. PoE one-brained, don't want to learn a new game even while they're playing a new game. And then I think the PoE 2 Reddit's reply to the game has been that like the pain is good, comboing skills is really awesome, dodging is awesome, and for me, I don't really care that the bosses are making me dodge for what feels like 90% of a lot of the fights, but when I go back and look at some of the footage, it's actually less than 40%. The challenge is the point. I feel very much in that second camp. I absolutely feel challenged by this game, but in a way that I really, really enjoy. I think the biggest tips I have for making it through the challenge are continue upgrading your gear, kill more guys and get more XP. Like if you are struggling at all, get up to the level of the zone, or even as much as a level or 2 above the zone. That really will help make the combat easier to just be a little over leveled if you need to. And then also hang on to any decent resistance gear that you find, because you may need some of it for later bosses. I also would say experimenting with different skill and support gem combos has really, really helped. It really took me a while to lock in on what I am now using to absolutely shred monsters and bosses. Having some dedicated boss skill setups, stuff that's just for bossing or rares or uniques or whatever, and then some stuff that's mostly just for clearing has also really helped. I also would say like don't play around with dot effects, like damaging dot effects, incoming ones. Burning Ground, Poison, Shock Ground, Chill Dot, all of those absolutely trucked my character pretty much at every single point throughout the campaign. I also feel like I'm not really getting much healing value out of my life flask, so I would say anything you can add in to get extra healing through your kit. I don't know about Recoup, I haven't played with that, although thought about it. But just anything, I think just literally flat life regen, as much as that is a meme in PoE 1, I found that getting like 6 or 8 points of flat life regen in Act 1 was noticeable and really helped with surviving a lot of the content throughout that act. All right, now for bosses, I think my plan for PoE 2 was to kill every single boss and explore every single side area. You know, you only get the one shot through the campaign. I have this somewhere in my notes, I think further down, but you only get the one shot through the campaign the first time. You can only experience something for the first time once. And so I really wanted to kind of savor that flavor and just explore everything that the acts have to offer. And then, you know, once I'm running through acts 1 through 3 again on cruel difficulty, sure, I'll kind of zoom through whatever, but I just really wanted to see it all, experience it all, not in a super duper rush to get to endgame. And bosses do actually play a pretty big role throughout the campaign. Displaying all the side bosses in each area on the region map, which I can show off in game here, has been a really good idea. Well, might take a second. All right, here we go. You can see that like there are these skulls, and the ones that are just kind of like basically a rare encounter will just be kind of like half a skull, just the upper half. And ones that actually have like a reward associated with them will be like a full skull with like a little back plate to it and like a plus sign. And they actually give stuff. The King of the Mist gives spirit, so you can start using aura gems. Crowbell gives you 2 passive skill points, and you can use those as weapon set passives. And they will be grayed out once they're killed. Like I've killed everything, so it's all grayed out, but I really like that they display this so you're not having to hunt around for stuff that you may not even know is there. You know it's there, and you know to go hunting around. The bosses in this game have mechanics from the very beginning. It's not just like Hail Rake from the Tidal Island in PoE 1 where they just spam one skill from the start of the fight until they die. Also, the Hail Rake replacement, or really replacements, there are kind of 2 different cold witches early on in Act 1. They are hard. The presentation of bosses has also been really amazing. Those end of act bosses really feel important. Like there's a lot of story being told there, and just like a lot of visual design and sound design. It's just really good. The Act 2 final boss started mocking my character for their heart racing, and I realized that my heart was actually racing in real life. I was low on life flask, low on health, and I felt very like seen by the boss in that moment. But the bosses have actually made me feel something. They've killed me plenty. I've had to reconsider my approach on multiple occasions, change skills around. I actually did change some gear around on the second act boss. I've had skill setups that are just for bossing, and all of that feels really amazing. I had to switch to more lightning resistance for the Act 2 boss, for example. I think if I had gotten more cold res for the Act 1 for final boss, that would have felt a lot easier as well. I'm just really loving the bosses. Even the ones that I think aren't all that great still seem like they could really be good if I didn't kill them so quickly, if I weren't like a little overpowered at some points. I think some of the bosses that I kind of zoomed through could actually still be pretty solid. You know, they might wind up being pretty good if there's like an enhanced version of them in maps. The main key to all of the bosses is really figuring out when to dodge and when to punish them, and I think that's really the main Elden Ring Dark Souls comparison that I would make to Path of Exile 2, the one area where I think it's more like those games than it is like Path of Exile 1. You can't just face tank bosses like you can in PoE 1, at least as a monk. You do have to outplay the bosses, but the end result is that you feel outrageously skillful. Okay, let's talk about the acts. Act 1 has a really hard start. I think it has great bosses pretty much throughout the whole act. I think it has a really awesome vibe as well. I really like the graveyard. The mausoleum in the graveyard in particular just really stood out to me. I really like the monster design in that area. It all reminded me of Diablo 2 in a really wonderful way. The side zones that are inside areas, like little sub-dungeons, are very fun to explore. I feel like there could be something around every single corner. I think this isn't really a criticism, just a comment. I was surprised by how short Act 1 was, relatively speaking. I think maybe it's the Blizzard of it all, the Blizzard background I have, but like I expected a super long Act 1, but it actually felt very reasonably paced, kind of, it moved quickly. And then the Act 1 final boss was super awesome, very cinematic. He really made me work for the kill, and I loved every second of it. The storytelling that is going on there is very good. There is, not to spoil anything, there's an event that occurs on the first pull. It's very dramatic, and then if you wipe later on in the pull, it doesn't keep happening over and over again. You just get the one exchange of hearing that voice line, the NPC dialogue, and I really like that. It felt felt very modern. It also made the story being told through that exchange feel much more believable and less annoying as I wiped several times and then had to hear the same two NPCs have the same banter back and forth. Like, none of that. Now, Act 2 was a really huge act. It has so much content, super long areas and tons of them, but not nearly as many bosses, so I didn't like it as much as Act 1 for that reason. There were some really memorable bosses though, but also some that were, just kind of whatever. I really still like the zone. I like the theme of traveling around with the caravan. I do like the variety of biomes that exist in what is still like a desert. I really liked the variety of biomes in Act 1, swamps and graveyards and mausoleums and stuff. As for the map design of Act 2, I think the last two zones didn't really work as well. They have very narrow corridors, which is a little annoying for my build because I kind of do a lot of branching out. But more importantly, it causes all of the enemies to bottleneck, and some of their pathing AI breaks, and they'll just kind of stand there waiting for you to cross the bridge and get hit 10 times and instantly die. Or you can just like kill them from range while they stand still and do nothing, and neither of those is really great. With that being said, the majority of Act 2 was very fun, and I think the layouts were pretty good. I liked the big sandy caves. I liked most of the bosses in the act. They're also creating kind of new vectors and big guy bosses. I think that's another basis for comparison with Elden Ring. There are some huge bosses that you kill in Act 2, and they're kind of playing around with arenas a bit as well, just different sizes, shapes, stuff with the camera. Really creative stuff. I like it. Good act, and I think if I had a single tip for this, just be sure to have a lot of lightning resistance that you bring into that final boss fight. All right, now I'm going to talk about Monk. I really like the way that this character handles. The Ascendancy is super versatile. You could absolutely build it in a number of different ways and make it into a spellcaster, a pure melee build, or some hybrid of the two. There's just so much potential. I'm going straight melee as GGG intended with Monk, at least for now. I'm building for shock, crit, and power charges offensively, and then I'm building for energy shield and evasion defensively. Visuals are amazing. The flow of skills is really good. I just really like the presentation of the character. I do kind of feel like I'm balancing on a razor's edge, though, at any given time. Like, if I'm not playing pretty well, like if I just dive into a pack of enemies and just kind of hang out there for a second, I'm dead. Pretty much all of my deaths that weren't to bosses and me messing up a mechanic have been letting myself get surrounded. So I try to never let that happen whenever I was going to say mapping, but progressing through the zones. I also kind of like the character of the monk. He's kind of a dick. I thought he would be zen, like placid and chill, but he's not. He's like boastful, mocking the monsters he kills, and I really like that. Kind of more like the duelist or the shadow than I had expected him to be. All right, so this is my passive tree. I am a Chayula Monk. I started out by taking Waking Dream as my first ascendancy, and I can talk about that a little bit. So this is just an always-on passive. If I open up my skills here, it shows up here at the top. You can support it with stuff, but I don't have anything that I really want to support it with. It eats into your spirit, and I'm spending that on a couple of other auras. But as you can see, just to kind of look at the tooltip, when you take Into the Breach, you just permanently have this as a buff, and you will manifest Flames of Chayula around you every 1.32 seconds. That's the initial level. It goes down as you continue to get levels, and once you quality it up, I think it's basically every second you will spawn one. And then they fade after, I think it's just still 25 seconds. I don't think that ever changes. Maybe like increased duration support or something could maybe make that last longer. I don't know. And so what happens is they'll spawn kind of, you see this little purple edge here where my cursor is around the character. These flames will spawn around there, and there's 3 flavors of them: red, yellow, and purple. No, red, blue, and purple. I know my colors. So blue is mana, red is life, and purple is chaos damage. And one thing that I unfortunately didn't expect, or I guess maybe I should say I expected it, but I hoped it wasn't the case, is that these purple buffs, if you watch me picking them up, they have independent timers on them. So the red and the blue buff are just leech. They leech you life and mana. By default, it is 7% of life and mana that you get back. It's kind of hard to find this. You have to like mouse over and then like freeze it with my keybind is Alt for examining stuff. Hold Alt and then mouse it over. So 7% of life, 7% of mana from the red and blue, and then 7% of damage as extra chaos for 5 seconds, stacking up to 10 times from the purple. But because each of the purple buffs has its own unique timer, you're really never getting more than about maybe 2 to 4 on you at a given time. Like sometimes you'll get 4 and then you'll be able to like drop a big combo finisher and get a bunch of burst damage out of that, but you're not really getting all that much damage out of this passive for now. However, once you take Lucid Dreaming, that will double the effect and the duration of all of the Flames of Chayula, so the life and the mana being leached back to you is going to be substantially increased. And that life and mana is quite significant already. It's really helping a lot with sustain. I have basically not had to use my mana flask since I ascended. I didn't really feel like I had too much before, but especially since I ascended, I really just feel like I've barely touched it at all. I've never had any points where I've heard like out of mana, no more, like that's never happened at all. The life, for the most part, the life leech has also been really, really helpful from the end of the breach. And then the damage is kind of just an extra bonus. And then once I take that second ascendancy, I think that's when the damage is really going to have more of an impact. Now, the thing about these flames is that they kind of spawn right at the edge of the breach. So if you're kind of sitting and fighting, or you're doing like builder kind of setup on a boss for a little bit, and then you start to dodge for a mechanic, you can run out and dodge and pick up a bunch of flames real quick, and there will be a massive number of flames out there to pick up. And then you can kind of uncork that finisher. So initially I was worried that this might be like kind of an annoying play style, but I think in the experience of kind of moving around and dodging, ducking, dipping, diving, and dodging, I think it actually works out pretty well and kind of gives you something to dodge out of mechanics and into to restore your life and mana. I found this to be pretty great, and I think because it is Leech, I think this will work really well with Ravenous Doubts and Consuming Questions, and I think that might be the direction I go with for my 3rd and 4th Ascendancy, to make the Mana Leech be instant and also affect my Energy Shield. And then I think later I might come up here and take some stuff like Lucidity and these points on the way to it to give myself like damage taken from Mana Before Life, and then like maybe some stuff like Patient Barrier to give myself more Energy Shield, a lot of like leaning into the Energy Shield and evasion and, you know, turning mana into an extra health pool as well. I don't know if I'm going to go Chaos Inoculation on this character. May wind up not happening, we'll see. So as for the rest of the passive tree, I kind of broke one of my big rules in PoE, where you basically never want to start crit, and for what it's worth, I didn't take these 2 crit bonus nodes here. I took the 2 attack damage bonus nodes, but I came up here and I went right through crit, and then I came over here to Moment of Truth as my like first kind of off the beaten path notable, and I've like leaned into crit as kind of my starting approach here. I took crit, and then I came down and I took Lust for Power. It's 5% chance that if you gain power charges, you get max power charges instead, and +1 to max power charges. I took Blinding Strike, and then Subterfuge Mask and Shimmering to get myself a little bit more defensive, and then Essence of the Storm to really help with shocking more often, because I picked up Siphoning Strike, and that helps with generating power charges in single target. And that is really how we do all of our damage, is through power charges. So right now I have come over here, I'm going to Deadly Force, taking True Strike for the Jugular and Deadly Force, going super crit heavy, and I think my next couple of like moves here are, you know, I haven't decided exactly where I want to go. I kind of want to come over here and get Overflowing Power, get more power charges, get all of these Endless Circuit, Wild Storm, and Expose to the Storm all these lightning damage nodes, because I'm doing a lot of lightning damage. I'll get the Power Within as well. Some of these bonuses that are associated with power charges are just really strong. Even some of these small passives, 20% increased power Energy Shield if you've consumed a power charge recently. That's a lot of the time, so that's pretty good. Probably going to take General Electric and Harmonic Generator as well, just get even more shock chance and damage with shocks and value of shock and crit chance on shocked enemies. Just really lean in on shocking enemies and just treat that Chayula damage like that chaos damage from Chayula as kind of an extra bonus. Now there is one interaction I want to talk about with that, and that would be Event Horizon. Gives you a massive amount of increased chaos damage, 53%, and then you also lose life and energy shield when you use a chaos skill. But if you're just getting extra chaos damage and you're just using non-chaos skills to do that damage, you're not really getting that downside at all. You're just getting the massive damage benefit. And then you can also come in and take Spaghettification, move speed, chaos damage, minus chaos res is maybe not so great, but then like attributes as well also seems pretty good. And then there was another one up here, Pure Chaos as well, just a bunch of extra chaos damage, 11% extra chaos damage, and then Wither Away, for what it's worth, you get kind of built-in Wither. So I think there's some potential synergy for chaos damage down the road that I might try and spec into. I might even go with Poison Angle down the line instead of all this shock stuff. I haven't really, I'll kind of figure it out once I get to maps. There's a lot of really good stuff around the tree. There's stuff like Sharp Sight Serrated Edges, and Manifold Method, all of which give you like a pretty good basic bonus, attack speed here, crit chance here, and mana leech here, but then also apply like some extra bonus for rare and uniques, like extra accuracy or attack damage or chance to inflict ailments. All three of these are in a really good cluster. And just like wanted to point out that Pocket Sand gives increased blind effect. Chance to blind seems pretty good as an evasion build, and then 50% extra effect on that blind is also really good, lowering enemy accuracy and evasion rating. Definitely very good. And then One with the Storm is another one that I'm definitely looking toward going for later on. Quarterstaff skills that consume power charges count as consuming an extra power charge. Probably am going to play with Flicker at some point further down the line, the lifespan of this character. Okay, so now I want to talk about skills, and for a while I was using Quarterstaff Strike, and I actually had it hooked up to Martial Tempo, and I can't remember some other support gem, and it was actually doing quite good damage, but I have subsequently switched over to Ice Strike as my preferred kind of default attack. I have Martial Tempo and then Conduction hooked up to that, trying to get more shock chance. I was playing around with, I think I have it in my support gem tab here. Yeah, I had Ice Bite hooked up to that, so when I was freezing enemies a lot, gaining 35% of damage as extra cold whenever you freeze an enemy with that Ice Strike, I found that to be really helpful. Just added a lot of extra damage. But I've been mainly using Falling Thunder as kind of my main spender skill, my big burst. And the thing with Falling Thunder is it really does like an underwhelming amount of damage, and it's like a very small cone unless you have a power charge. If you have a power charge, it becomes this huge cone that can do like full screen clear, and it does more damage based on the amount of charges you have. So I really like Perpetual Charge hooked up to that so that you have a pretty high chance to not remove the charges but still count as consuming them. And then Lightning Infusion, since I'm doing mostly lightning damage, give you 25% of all your damage as extra lightning damage. Less Cold and Fire, but that's fine. I don't really have much in the way of Cold and Fire. I have gotten to the point where I have unlocked an extra support gem, and since it is a slam skill, I've hooked Fist of War up. It's not a skill that I'm just running around slamming constantly with. I'm kind of using it as a finisher. So Fist of War being just a trigger every 6 seconds actually works out perfectly for 20% more damage in area on it most of the time that I use it. Actually a pretty great support skill. Now, in order to facilitate the generation of power charges, I really have a couple of methods here. I have Killing Palm. That's kind of my main one when I'm clearing. I'll run around and lower stuff's health with a couple of different skills, Ice Strike, or maybe, a charged Falling Thunder, and then I'll finish mobs off with Killing Palm, and Killing Palm dashes. It's a little slow. It culls, it can't be evaded, it does a decent amount of damage, and more importantly, it generates a power charge if it kills enemies, and then I have that hooked up to Perfusion, so we have 50% chance to generate an extra charge. And also, Life Drain gives you 12% of your life over 4 seconds whenever it successfully culls, so those both really synergize nicely with Killing Palm. I like that a lot. I've also been using Vaulting Impact to help with movement, so there are a lot of times where you get blocked in by guys and you can't roll out, and Vaulting Impact helps with kind of initiation. It also helps with dodging away from enemies, and then I have it hooked up to Magnified Effect for more area and Overpower for more stun buildup, so it actually helps with stunning big packs of enemies right at the start of a pull as well. So a lot of the time I will just Vaulting Impact in and then immediately Killing Palm, and then finish them with a Falling Thunder, and that can clear out a pack pretty easily. For single target, I have Siphoning Strike. This is for just like pure single target when I'm not able to get those Killing Palms. If you get a shock on an enemy, and this is why I switched over to Conduction on Ice Strike, and also why I took these 2 points in Essence of Storm, and probably going to come up and take General Electric as well, just to get more shock chance. If you have a shock on an enemy and you hit them with a Siphoning Strike, it'll suck that shock out of them and give you a power charge. It also does like some lightning damage, whatever. I think it can't re-shock, but it can do like a decent amount of damage. It does a decent amount of stun build-up, but more importantly than anything else, it gives you a power charge, and that allows you to then like roll back into that Falling Thunder combo, back and forth and back and forth. So this has really, really helped on bosses. Siphoning Strike is not like a low-level skill. I think I didn't get this until the middle of Act 2. Yeah, it's like a level 7 skill, so this is for level 22. So I think I got this around Ascendancy time. I think that was like level 22, a little earlier than I expected. Until that point, I really was just kind of rocking with Ice Strike as more of a heavy hitter, and then anytime there were ads, I would use those to get power charges and then Falling Thunder. But other than that, pretty much just ice striking bosses like start to finish. And then sometimes I would hit them with like Staggering Palm is pretty useful for getting a big stun on bosses. I kind of liked having Staggering Palm even if I'm not going to use it, just socketed, because it will show when enemies are ready to be stunned, you know, kind of let you know when to lock in on somebody. Another skill I played around with for a while early on, along with Vaulting Impact, was Frozen Locust. It makes you jump back and drop an ice crystal, and then if you or enemies hit it, it will explode and do a freeze nova around it, and so I like that hooked up to a couple of skills that helped with freezing. Trying to find them here. Glaciation really helped a lot, 50% more freeze buildup, and then I think I might have just used like the increased area that I currently have tied to Vaulting Impact, the magnified effect, I think I was using in conjunction with Frozen Locust. Now I swapped that out once I got Wave of Frost, some point in Act 2 as well, and I kind of use Wave of Frost in the same way. It gives you a jump back and Frozen Cone, and then I hooked it up the same way and used it for the same purpose, just to kind of like leap in, stun guys, and then leap out and freeze. It's important when you're using those two skills, Frozen Locust and Wave of Frost, they do leap back. So if you're clicking to move, which I am, you're going to want to put your mouse so that you're moving away from your mouse. So bear that in mind. Editor's note, again, hooking either of those two up to Ice Bite so that you can use them to proc Frost and then get 35% extra damage as cold. That sounds pretty good to me. I'm probably going to play around with that more once I finish this video and get logged back in. Also, there's like a little bit of trickery that can happen with Vaulting Impact. Like you can very, very much Vaulting Impact right where you're standing. It just takes a little bit of effort, but there's like a surprising amount of control in the Vaulting Impact that's available, more so than, than physics would allow. And then we come to my last couple of skills here. I have Mantra of Destruction. This is something I picked up relatively late in Act 2, and the way that this works is it's like a combo skill. You can kind of use it the same way you would the Tempest Bell, which I think I threw back in the stash. I don't really love the Tempest Bell. I know some people really like it, and maybe I should play around with it, but I just didn't really like it all that much thematically. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to playing around with the Tempest Bell. We'll see. I've been playing around with Mantra of Destruction instead. This requires 10 combo, and you have to hit enemies with strikes every so often to build up combo. And then once you get to 10 stacks, you can use it. It'll suck all those combo points up, and it'll give you an empowered attack that gives you 30% of your damage as extra chaos. And then it also gives you Purple Flames of Chayula based on the number of enemies you kill. So you can get 5, 10, whatever stacks of the Chayula buff, and those do stack with the ones that you pick up by running around. So being able to ice strike something, shock it, then hit it with a siphoning strike, you're at 10 stacks of Mantra of Destruction, you hit that, and then you hit them with a big fully empowered Falling Thunder, and you just watch their health evaporate. Feels really, really, really good. And then I also hooked pre-med support up to that for just extra damage as well, so that just really, really ramp up the damage on those big Falling Thunders. Now, as for my auras, I was using a combination of auras. I played around with Ghost Dance. That was the one I went with initially. Didn't really think it was all that great with very bad gear. Herald of Thunder I thought worked pretty well for pretty bad gear. It just gives you extra damage procs after you kill a shocked enemy, which actually works pretty well for this build with the Falling Thunder doing so much damage. But then I kind of felt that my defenses were suffering, and I got lucky and I found a body armor, or I gambled a body armor that had 30 extra spirit, so I hooked up Ghost Dance as my second aura. But once I got Lingering Illusion available, I switched over to that, and that really helped with power charges a lot. I've also hooked Persistence into that, and it doesn't have any downside. It just makes your spirits last longer, and what Lingering Illusion does is if I roll, it leaves a little guy behind, and if enemies kill it, I get a power charge. That's all it's there for, really, but it actually helps a lot with power charge generation. All right, so that's pretty much the character. I'm really, really happy with it. I kind of have a flowing playstyle where I'm using Falling Thunder to really clear out packs and to be my big burn on bosses, and then using Ice Strike and Killing Palm to kind of kill off stragglers or do setup in between pulls in packs, and then on single target, pretty much using Siphoning Strike to be able to generate the charges to continue Falling Thunder spamming, and Ice Strike to kind of set up the shocks to get those Siphoning Strike charges in the first place. All right, so there's a lot more I could talk about with this game, but I'll just say that Camille and his team have done such a good job with the music and sound. Yeah, I was planning to like watch something. I usually play video games with some kind of like second screen entertainment going on. I was planning to watch some unsettling movies like Barbarian and Beyond the Black Rainbow, but I have literally been watching and listening to nothing except Path of Exile 2 this whole time. And I have absolutely no regrets. My music volume is up, my enjoyment is up, the game is awesome. I think the charm system is really good. The flasks and mana actually feel really good. The visuals are great. The UX is really good. The little tutorial videos when making skill gems are really impressive. The indications on support gem availability. Oh, one other thing I started getting into the edit and realized I needed to add this in is the pausing. The ability to pause the game, I think, is hugely valuable. I know some people might consider this controversial. I think those people are fools. I think that pausing is great. There's really no downside to it at all in a single player game, being able to pause and go grab a drink or deal with an emergency or something instead of just losing your character or losing a bunch of progress. Really doesn't bother me at all, and I truly could not care less what hardcore people are doing. If they're able to use this to cheese their way around hardcore stuff, don't care. Good for them. That sounds like a skill move, and if you're upset about it, my recommendation would be just be as skillful as they are. Wow, I'm saying good. I guess they really did make Dark Souls 4. Well, anyway, this game is everything we hoped it would be. It's all great. We are having an incredible time. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.